The 10th story. The Marquis of Saluzzo, constrained by the prayers of his vassals to marry, but determined to do it after his own fashion, taketh to wife the daughter of a peasant and hath of her 2 children, whom he maketh believe to her to put to death. After which, feigning to be grown weary of her and to have taken another wife, bring his own daughter home to his house, as she were his new bride, and turneth his wife away in her shift. But, finding her patient under everything, he fetch her home again, dar than ever, and showing her children grown great, and letteth honor her as marchioness. The king's long story being ended, and having, to all appearance, much pleased all, Dionio said, laughing, "The good man, who looked that night to abase the phantom's tail upright, had not given a brace of farthings of all the praises that you bestow on Messer Torello." Then, knowing that it rested with him alone to tell, he proceeded, "Gentle ladies mine, it appeareth to me that this day hath been given up to kings and soldans and the like folk. Wherefore, that I may not remove over far from you, I purpose to relate to you of a marquess, not an act of magnificence, but a monstrous folly, which, albeit good ensued to him thereof in the end, I counsel not any to imitate, for it was 1,000 pities that weal betided him thereof. It is now a great while agone since the chief of the house among the marquesses of Saluzzo was a youth called Gualtieri, who, having neither wife nor children, spent his time in naught but hunting and hawking, nor had any thought of taking a wife nor of having children, wherein he deserved to be reputed very wise. The thing, however, not pleasing his vassals, they besought him many times to take a wife, so he might not abide without an heir, nor they without a lord, and offered themselves to find him one of such a fashion and born of such parents that good hopes might be had of her, and he be well content with her. Whereto he answered, My friends, you constrain me unto that which I was altogether resolved never to do, considering how hard a thing it is to find a wife whose fashions sort well within one's own humor, and how great an abundance there is of the contrary sort, and how dour a life is his who happineth upon a woman not well suited unto him. To say that you think, by the manners and fashions of the parents, to know the daughters, wherefrom you argue to give me a wife such as will please me, is a folly, since I know not whence you may avail to know their fathers nor yet the secrets of their mothers. And even did you know them, daughters are often unlike their parents. However, since it e'en pleaseth you to bind me in these chains, I am content to do your desire. But that I may not have occasion to complain of other than myself, if it prove ill done, I mean to find a wife for myself, certifying you that, whomsoever I may take me, if she be not honored of you as your lady and mistress, you shall prove, to your cost, how much it irketh me to have at your entreaty taken a wife against mine own will. The good honest men replied that they were content, so he would but bring himself to take a wife. Now the fashions of a poor girl, who was of a village near to his house, had long pleased Gualtieri, and him seeming she was fair enough, he judged that he might lead a very comfortable life with her. Wherefore, without seeking farther, he determined to marry her, and sending for her father, who was a very poor man, agreed with him to take her to wife. This done, he assembled all his friends of the country round, and said to them, My friends, it hath pleased and pleaseth you that I should dispose me to take a wife, and I have resigned myself thereto, more to complease you than of any desire I have for marriage. You know what you promise me, to wit, that you would be content with and honor as your lady and mistress her whom I should take, whosoever she might be. Wherefore the time is come when I am to keep my promise to you, and when I would have you keep yours to me. I have found a damsel after mine own heart and purpose within some few days hence to marry her and bring her home to my house. Wherefore do you bethink yourselves how the bride feast may be a goodly one, and how you may receive her with honor, on such wise that I may avouch myself contented of your promise, even as you will have cause to be of mine. The good folk all answered joyfully that this liked them well, and that, be she who he would, they would hold her for lady and mistress and honor her as such in all things. After which, they all addressed themselves to hold fair and high and glad festival, and on like wise did Gualtieri, who let make ready very great and goodly nuptials, and bade thereto many his friends and kinsfolk and great gentlemen and others of the neighborhood. Moreover, he let cut and fashion store of rich and goodly apparel, after the measure of a damsel who seemed to him like of her person to the young woman he was purposed to marry, and provided also rings and girdles, and a rich and goodly crown, and all that behoveth unto a bride. The day come that he had appointed for the nuptials, Gualtieri towards half-tierce mounted to horse, he and all those who were come to do him honor, and having ordered everything needful. Gentlemen, quoth he, it is time to go fetch the bride. Then, setting out with all his company, he rode to the village and betaking himself to the house of the girl's father, found her returning in great haste with water from the spring, so she might after go with other women to see Gualtieri's bride come. When the Marquis saw her, he called her by name, to wit, Griselda, and asked her where her father was, to which she answered bashfully, My lord, he is within the house. Thereupon Gualtieri dismounted and bidding all await him, entered the poor house alone, where he found her father, whose name was Janucolo, and said to him, I am come to marry Griselda, but first I would fain know of her somewhat in thy presence. Accordingly he asked her if, and he took her to wife, she would still study to please him, nor take umbrage at aught that he should do or say, and if she would be obedient, and many other like things, to all of which she answered aye. Whereupon Gualtieri, taking her by the hand, led her forth, and in the presence of all his company and of everyone else, let strip her naked. Then sending for the garments which he had let make, he caused forthright clothe and shoe her, and would have her set the crown on her hair, all tumbled as it was. After which, all marveling at this, he said, Gentlemen, this is she who I purpose shall be my wife, and she will have me to husband. Then, turning to her where she stood, all shamefast and confounded, he said to her, Griselda, wilt thou have me to thy husband? To which she answered, Aye, my lord. Quoth he, And I will have thee to my wife, and espoused her in the presence of all. Then, mounting her on a palfrey, he carried her, honorably accompanied, to his mansion, where the nuptials were celebrated with the utmost splendor and rejoicing, no otherwise than as he had taken to wife the king's daughter of France. The young wife seemed to have, together with her clothes, changed her mind and her manners. She was, as we have already said, goodly of person and countenance, and even as she was fair, on like wise she became so engaging, so pleasant and so well-mannered that she seemed rather to have been the child of some noble gentleman than the daughter of Janucolo and a tender of sheep, whereof she made every one marvel who had known her aforetime. Moreover, she was so obedient to her husband and so diligent in his service that he accounted himself the happiest and best contented man in the world. And on like wise, she bore herself with such graciousness and such loving kindness towards her husband's subjects that there was none of them but loved and honored her with his whole heart, praying all for her welfare and prosperity and advancement. And whereas they were used to say that Gualtieri had done as one of little wit to take her to wife, they now with one accord declared that he was the sagest and best advised man alive, for that none other than he might ever have availed to know her high worth, hidden as it was under poor clothes and a rustic habit. Brief, it was no great while ere she knew so to do that, not only in her husband's marquisate, but everywhere else, she made folk talk of her virtues and her well-doing, and turned to the contrary whatsoever had been said against her husband on her account, weenas he married her. She had not long abidden with Gualtieri heir, she conceived with child, and in due time bore a daughter, whereat he rejoiced greatly. But a little after, a new thought having entered his mind, to wit, to seek, by dint of long tribulation and things unendurable, to make trial of her patience, he first goaded her with words, feigning himself troubled and saying that his vassals were exceeding ill content with her, by reason of her mean extraction, especially since they saw that she bore children, and that they did nothing but murmur, being sore chagrined for the birth of her daughter. The lady, hearing this, replied, without anywise changing countenance or showing the least distemperature, My lord, do with me that which thou deemest will be most for thine honor and solace, for that I shall be content withal, knowing, as I do, that I am of less account than they, and that I was unworthy of this dignity to which thou hast advanced me of thy courtesy. This reply was mighty agreeable to Gualtieri, for that he saw she was not uplifted into aught of pridefulness for any honor that himself or others had done her. But a little after, having in general terms told her that his vassals could not brook this girl that had been born of her, he sent to her a serving man of his, whom he had lessoned, and who said to her with a very woeful countenance, Madam, and I would not die, needs must I do that which my lord commandeth me. He hath bidden me take this your daughter, and said no more. The lady, hearing this and seeing the servant's aspect and remembering her of her husband's words, concluded that he had enjoined him put the child to death. Whereupon, without changing countenance, albeit she felt a sore anguish at heart, she straightway took her from the cradle and having kissed and blessed her, laid her in the servant's arms, saying, Take her and punctually do that which thy Lord hath enjoined thee, but leave her not to be devoured of the beasts and the birds, except he command it thee. The servant took the child, and reported that which the lady had said to Gualtieri, who marveled at her constancy, and dispatched him with the child to a kinswoman of his at Bologna, praying her to bring her up and rear her diligently, without ever saying whose daughter she was. In course of time, the lady again conceived, and in due season bore a male child, to her husband's great joy. But that which he had already done sufficing him not, he addressed himself to probe her to the quick with a yet sorer stroke, and accordingly said to her one day with a troubled air, Wife, since thou hast borne this male child, I have noways been able to live in peace with these my people. So sore do they murmur that a grandson of Januculo should become their lord after me. Wherefore I misdoubt me, and I would not be driven forth of my domains. It will behove me do in this case that which I did otherwhen and ultimately put thee away and take another wife. The lady gave ear to him with a patient mind, nor answered other what then. My lord, study to content thyself, and to satisfy thy pleasure, and have no thought of me, for that nothing is dear to me save in so much as I see it please thee. Not many days after, Gualtieri sent for the son, even as he had sent for the daughter, and making a like show of having him put to death, dispatched him to Bologna, there to be brought up, even as he had done with the girl. But the lady made no other countenance nor other words thereof than she had done of the girl. Whereat Gualtieri marveled sore, and affirmed in himself that no other woman could have availed to do this that she did. And had he not seen her tender her children with the utmost fondness, what while it pleased him, he had believed that she did this because she recked no more of them, whereas in effect he knew that she did it of her discretion. His vassals, believing that he had caused put the children to death, blamed him sore, accounting him a barbarous man, and had the utmost compassion of his wife, who never answered other what to the ladies who condoled with her for her children, thus slain, than that which pleased him thereof who had begotten them, pleased her also. At last, several years being passed since the birth of the girl, Gualtieri, deeming it time to make the supreme trial of her endurance, declared in the presence of his people that he could no longer endure to have Griselda to wife, and that he perceived that he had done ill and boyishly in taking her. Wherefore he purposed, as far as in him lay, to make interest with the Pope to grant him a dispensation, so he might put her away and take another wife. For this he was roundly taken to task by many men of worth, but answered them nothing save that needs must it be so. The lady, hearing these things and her seeming she must look to return to her father's house, and maybe tend sheep again as she had done aforetime, what while she saw another woman in possession of him, to whom she willed all her weal, sorrowed sore in herself. But yet, even as she had borne the other affronts of fortune, so with a firm countenance she addressed herself to bear this also. Gualtieri, no great while after let come to him from Rome counterfeit letters of dispensation, and gave his vassals to believe that the Pope had thereby licensed him to take another wife and leave Griselda. Then, sending for the latter, he said to her in presence of many, Wife, by concession made me of the Pope, I am free to take another wife and put thee away. And accordingly, for that mine ancestors have been great gentlemen and lords of this country, whilst thine have still been husbandmen, I mean that thou be no more my wife, but that thou return to Januculo his house with the dowry which thou broughtest me, and I will after bring hither another wife, for that have found one more sorted to myself. The lady, hearing this, contained her tears, contrary to the nature of woman, though not without great unease, and answered, My lord, I ever knew my mean estate to be nowise sortable with your nobility. And for that which I have been with you I have still confessed myself indebted to you and to God, nor have I ever made nor held it mine, as given to me, but have still accounted it but as a loan. It pleaseth you to require it again, and it must and doth please me to restore it to you. Here is your ring wherewith you espouse me, take it. You bid me carry away with me that dowry which I brought hither, which to do you will need no paymaster, and I neither purse nor packhorse. For I have not forgotten that you had me naked, and if you account it seemly that this my body, wherein I have carried children begotten of you, be seen of all, I will be gone naked. But I pray you, in requital of my maidenhead, which I brought hither and bear not hence with me, that it please you I may carry away at the least one sole shift over and above my dowry. Gualtieri, who had more mind to weep than to otherwhat, natheless kept a stern countenance and said, So be it, carry away a shift. As many as stood around besought him to give her a gown, so that she who had been 13 years and more, his wife, should not be seen go forth of his house on such mean and shameful wise as it was to depart in her shift. But their prayers all went for nothing. Wherefore the lady, having commended them to God, went forth his house in her shift, barefoot and nothing on her head, and returned to her father, followed by the tears and lamentations of all who saw her. Janucolo, who had never been able to believe it true that Gualtieri should entertain his daughter to wife, and went in daily expectation of this event, had kept her the clothes which she had put off the morning that Gualtieri had married her, and now brought them to her. Whereupon she donned them and addressed herself, as she had been wont to do, to the little offices of her father's house, enduring the cruel onslaught of hostile fortune with a stout heart. Gualtieri, having done this, gave out to his people that he had chosen a daughter of one of the counts of Panego, and letting make great preparations for the nuptials, sent for Griselda to come to him, and said to her, I am about to bring home this lady, whom I have newly taken to wife, and mean, at this her first coming, to do her honor. Thou knowest I have no women about me, who know how to array me the rooms nor to do a multitude of things that behove unto such a festival. Wherefore do thou, who art better versed than any else in these household matters, order that which is to do here, and let bid such ladies as it seemeth good to thee, and receive them as thou wert mistress here. Then, when the nuptials are ended, thou mayst be gone back to thy house. Albeit these words were all daggers to Griselda's heart, who had been unable to lay down the love she bore him as she had laid down her fair fortune, she replied, My lord, I am ready and willing. Then, in her coarse homespun clothes, entering the house, whence she had a little before departed in her shift, she fell to sweeping and ordering the chambers, and letting place hangings and cover cloths about the saloons, and make ready the viands, putting her hand to everything, as she were some paltry serving wench of the house, nor ever gave over till she had arrayed and ordered everything as it behoved. Thereafter, having let invite all the ladies of the country on Gualtieri's part, she awaited the day of the festival, which being come, with a cheerful countenance, and the spirit and bearing of a lady of high degree, for all she had mean clothes on her back, she received all the ladies who came thither. Meanwhile Gualtieri, who had caused the 2 children be diligently reared in Bologna by his kinswoman, who was married to a gentleman of the Panego family, the girl being now 12 years old, and the fairest creature that ever was seen, and the boy 6, had sent to his kinsman at Bologna, praying him be pleased to come to Saluzzo with his son and daughter, and take order to bring with him a goodly and honorable company, and bidding him tell everyone that he was carrying him the young lady to his wife, without otherwise discovering to any aught of who she was. The gentleman did as the Marquis prayed him, and setting out, with the girl and boy and a goodly company of gentlefolk, after some days' journey, arrived, about dinner-time, at Saluzzo, where he found all the countryfolk and many others of the neighborhood awaiting Gualtieri's new bride. The latter, being received by the ladies and come into the saloon where the tables were laid, Griselda came to meet her, clad as she was, and accosted her blithely, saying, Welcome and fair welcome to my lady. Thereupon the ladies, who had urgently, but in vain, besought Gualtieri to suffer Griselda to abide in a chamber, or lend her one of the gowns that had been hers, so that she might not go thus before his guests, were seated at table, and it was proceeded to serve them. The girl was eyed by everyone, and all declared that Gualtieri had made a good exchange, and among the rest Griselda commended her Amin, both her and her young brother. Gualtieri, perceiving that the strangeness of the case in no wise changed her, and being assured that this proceeded not from lack of understanding, for that he knew her to be very quick of wit, himseemed he had now seen fully as much as he desired of his lady's patience, and he judged it time to deliver her from the bitterness which he doubted not she kept hidden under her constant countenance. Wherefore, calling her to himself, he said to her, smiling in the presence of everyone, How deemest thou of our bride? My lord, answered she, I deem exceeding well of her, and if, as I believe, she is as discreet as she is fair, I doubt not a whit but you will live the happiest gentleman in the world with her. But I beseech you, as most I may, that you inflict not on her those pangs which you inflicted whiler on her who was sometime yours. For methinketh she might scarce avail to endure them, both because she is younger and because she hath been delicately reared, whereas the other had been in continual fatigues from a little child. Thereupon, Gualtieri, seeing she firmly believed that the young lady was to be his wife, nor therefore spoke anywise less than well, seated her by his side, and said to her, Griselda, it is now time that thou reap the fruits of thy long patience, and that those who have reputed me cruel and unjust and brutish should know that this which I have done I wrought to an end aforeseen, willing to teach thee to be a wife, and to show them how to take and use one, and at the same time to beget myself perpetual quiet. What while I had to live with thee, the which, weenas I came to take a wife, I was sore afraid might not betide me, and therefore, to make proof thereof, I probed and afflicted thee after such kind as thou knowest. And meseeming, for that I have never perceived that either in word or in deed hast thou departed from my pleasure, that I have of thee that solace which I desired, I purpose presently to restore thee, at one stroke, that which I took from thee at many, and to requite thee with a supreme delight the pangs I have inflicted on thee. Wherefore, with a joyful heart, take this, whom thou deemest my bride and her brother for thy children and mine. For these be they whom thou and many others have long accounted me to have barbarously let put to death. And I am thy husband, who loveth thee over all else, believing I may vaunt me that there is none else who can be so content of his wife as can I. So saying, he embraced her and kissed her. Then, rising up, he betook himself with Griselda, who wept for joy, whereas the daughter, hearing these things, sat all stupefied, and tenderly embracing her and her brother, undeceived her and many others who were there. Thereupon the ladies arose from table, overjoyed, and withdrew with Griselda into a chamber, where, with happier augury, pulling off her mean attire, they clad her anew in a magnificent dress of her own, and brought her again to the saloon, as a gentlewoman, which indeed she appeared, even in rags. There she rejoiced in her children with wonder-great joy, and all being overjoyed at this happy issue, they redoubled in feasting and merrymaking, and prolonged the festivities several days, accounting Gualtieri a very wise man, albeit they held the trials which he had made of his lady over harsh, nay, intolerable. But over all they held Griselda most sage. The Count of Panego returned, after some days, to Bologna, and Gualtieri, taking Janucolo from his labor, placed him in such a state as befitted his father-in-law, so that he lived in honor and great solace, and so ended his days, whilst he himself, having nobly married his daughter, lived long and happily with Griselda, honoring her as most might be. What more can here be said save that even in poor cottages there rain down divine spirits from heaven, like as in princely palaces there be those who were worthier to tend swine than to have lordship over men. Who but Griselda could, with a countenance not only dry but cheerful, have endured the barbarous and unheard proofs made by Gualtieri, which latter had not belike been ill requited, had he happened upon one who, when he turned her out of doors in her shift, had let jumble her furbelows of another to such purpose that a fine gown had come of it. Dionio's story being finished, and the ladies having discoursed amain thereof, some inclining to one side and some to another, this blaming one thing and that commending it, the king, lifting his eyes to heaven, and seeing that the sun was now low and the hour of vespers at hand, proceeded, without arising from session, to speak thus. Charming ladies, as I doubt not you know, the understanding of mortals consisteth not only in having in memory things past and taking cognizance of things present, but in knowing, by means of the one and the other of these, to forecast things future is reputed by men of mark to consist the greatest wisdom. Tomorrow, as you know, it will be 15 days since we departed Florence, to take some diversion for the preservation of our health and of our lives, eschewing the woes and dolours and miseries which, since this pestilential season began, are continually to be seen about our city. This, to my judgment, we have well and honourably done. For that, and I have known to see aright, albeit merry stories and belike incentive to concupiscence have been told here, and we have continually eaten and drunken well and danced and sung and made music, all things apt to incite weak minds to things less seemly. I have noted no act, no word, in fine nothing blameworthy, either on your part or on that of us men. Nay, meseemeth I have seen and felt here a continual decency, an unbroken concord and a constant fraternal familiarity, the which, at once for your honor and service, and for mine own, is, certes, most pleasing to me. Lest, however, for overlong usance aught should grow thereof that might issue in tediousness, and that none may avail to cavil at our overlong tarriance each of us. Moreover, having had his or her share of the honor that yet resideth in myself, I hold it meet, and it be your pleasure, that we now return whence we came. More by token that, if you consider aright, our company, already known to several others of the neighborhood, may multiply after a fashion that will deprive us of our every commodity. Wherefore, if you approve my counsel, I will retain the crown conferred on me until our departure, which I purpose shall be tomorrow morning. But should you determine otherwise, I have already in mind whom I shall invest withal for the ensuing day. Much was the debate between the ladies and the young men, but ultimately they all took the king's counsel for useful and seemly and determined to do as he proposed. Whereupon, calling the seneschal, he bespoke him of the manner which he should hold on the ensuing morning, and after, having dismissed the company until supper time, he rose to his feet. The ladies and the young men, following his example, gave themselves, this to one kind of diversion and that to another, no otherwise than of their wont. And supper time come, they betook themselves to table with the utmost pleasure, and after fell to singing and caroling and making music. Presently, Loretta leading up a dance, the king bade Fiametta sing a song, whereupon she very blithely proceeded to sing thus: If love came but without jealousy, I know no lady born so blithe as I were, whosoe'er she be. If gladsome youthfulness in a fair lover might content a maid, virtue and worth discreet, valiance or gentlesse, wit and sweet speech and fashions all arrayed in pleasantness complete, certes, I'm she for whose behoof these meet in one. For, love o'erborn, all these in him who is my hope I see. But for that I perceive that other women are as wise as I tremble for a fright and tending to believe the worst, in others the desire espy of him who steals my sprite. Thus this that is my good and chief delight enforceth me, forlorn, sigh sore and live in dole and misery. If I knew fealty such in him my lord as I know merit there, I were not jealous. But here is seen so much lovers to tempt, how true they be soer, I hold all false. Whereby I'm all disconsolate and fain would die, of each with doubting torn who eyes him, lest she bear him off from me. Be then, each lady prayed by God that she in this be not intent, gainst me to do amiss. For sure, if any maid should, or with words or becks or blandishment, my detriment in this seek or procure, and if I note, iwis, be all my charms forsworn, but I will make her rue it bitterly. No sooner had Fiametta made an end of her song than Dionio, who was beside her, said, laughing, Madam, you would do a great courtesy to let all the ladies know who he is, lest you be ousted of his possession through ignorance, since you would be so sore incensed thereat. After this divers other songs were sung, and the night being now well nigh half spent, they all, by the king's commandment, betook themselves to repose. As the new day appeared, they arose, and the seneschal having already dispatched all their gear in advance, they returned, under the guidance of their discreet king, to Florence, where the 3 young men took leave of the 7 ladies, and leaving them in Santa Maria Novella, whence they had set out with them, went about their other pleasures, whilst the ladies, ween as it seemed to them time, returned to their houses. Conclusion of the author. Most noble damsels, for whose solace I have addressed myself to so long a labor, I have now, methinketh, with the aid of the divine favor, vouchsafed me, as I deem, for your pious prayers and not for my proper merits, throughly accomplished that which I engaged at the beginning of this present work to do. Wherefore, returning thanks first to God and after to you, it behoveth to give rest to my pen and to my tired hand. Which ere I accord them, I purpose briefly to reply, as to objections tacitly broached, to certain small matters that may peradventure be alleged by some one of you or by others, since meseemeth very certain that these stories have no especial privilege more than other things. Nay, I mind me to have shown, at the beginning of the 4th day, that they have none such. There are, peradventure, some of you who will say that I have used overmuch license in inditing these stories, as well as in making ladies while say, and very often hearken to things not very seemly either to be said or heard of modest women. This I deny, for that there is nothing so unseemly as to be forbidden unto anyone, so but he express it in seemly terms, as meseemeth indeed I have here very aptly done. But let us suppose that it is so, For that I mean not to plead with you, who would overcome me. I say that many reasons very readily offer themselves in answer why I have done this. Firstly, if there be aught thereof in any of them, the nature of the stories required it. The which, and they be considered with the rational eye of a person of understanding, it will be abundantly manifest that I could not have otherwise recounted, and I would not altogether disfeature them. And if perchance there be therein some tittle, some wordlet or two freer, maybe, then liketh your squeamish hypocritical prudes, who weigh words rather than deeds and study more to appear, than to be good. I say that it should no more be forbidden me to write them than it is commonly forbidden unto men and women to say all day long hole and peg, and mortar and pestle and sausage and polony, and all manner like things. Without reckoning that no less liberty should be accorded to my pen than is conceded to the brush of the limner, who, without any, or at the least, any just reprehension, maketh let be Saint Michael smite the serpent with sword or spear, and Saint George the dragon, whereas it pleaseth them but Adam male and Eve female and affixeth to the cross, whiles with one nail and whiles with two, the feet of him himself who willed for the salvation of the human race to die upon the rood. Moreover, it is eth enough to see that these things are spoken, not in the church, of the affairs whereof it behoveth to speak with a mind, and in terms alike of the chastest. Albeit among its histories, there are tales enough to be found of another gates fashion than those written by me. Nor yet in these schools of philosophy, where decency is no less required than otherwhere, nor among churchmen or philosophers anywhere, but amidst gardens, in a place of pleasance and diversion, and among men and women, though young. Yet of mature wit, and not to be led astray by stories, at a time when it was not forbidden to the most virtuous to go, for their own preservation, with their breeches on their heads. Again, such as they are, these stories, like everything else, can both harm and profit, according to the disposition of the listener. Who knoweth not that wine, though, according to Cincigliani and Scalaggio and many others, an excellent thing for people in health, is hurtful unto whoso hath the fever? Shall we say, then, because it harmeth the fevered, that it is not? Who knoweth not that fire is most useful, nay, necessary to mortals? Shall we say, because it burneth houses and villages and cities, that it is not? Arms on likewise assure the welfare of those who desire to live in peace, and yet oftentimes slay men, not of any malice of their own, but of the perversity of those who use them wrongfully. Corrupt mind never understood word healthily, and even as seemly words profit not depraved minds, so those which are not altogether seemly avail not to contaminate the well-disposed, any more than mire can sully the rays of the sun or earthly foulness the beauties of the sky. What books, what words, what letters are holier, worthier, more venerable than those of the divine scriptures? Yet many there be, who, interpreting them perversely, have brought themselves and others to perdition. Everything in itself is good unto somewhat, and ill-used, may be in many things harmful, and so say I of my stories. If any be minded to draw therefrom ill counsel or ill practice, they will nowise forbid it him, if perchance they have it in them or be strained and twisted into having it. And whoso will have profit and utility thereof, they will not deny it him, nor will they be ever styled or accounted other than useful and seemly, if they be read at those times, and to those persons for which and for whom they have been recounted. Whoso hath to say paternosters, or to make tarts and puddings for her spiritual director, let her leave them be. They will not run after any to make her read them. Albeit your she saints themselves now and again say, and even do fine things. There be some ladies also who will say that there are some stories here, which had been better away. Granted, but I could not nor should write aught save those actually related, wherefore those who told them should have told them goodly, and I would have written them goodly. But if folk will e'en pretend that I am both the inventor and writer thereof, which I am not, I say that I should not take shame to myself that they were not all alike goodly, for that there is no craftsman living, barring God, who doth everything alike well and completely. Witness Charlemagne, who was the first maker of the paladins, but knew not to make so many thereof that he might avail to form an army of them alone. In the multitude of things, needs must divers qualities thereof be found. No field was ever so well tilled, but therein or nettles or thistles, or somewhat of briars or other weeds, might be found mingled with the better herbs. Besides, having to speak to simple lasses, such as you are for the most part, it had been folly to go seeking and wearying myself to find very choice and exquisite matters, and to use great pains to speak very measuredly. Algates, whoso goeth reading among these, let him leave those which offend and read those which divert. They all, not to lead anyone into error, bear branded upon the forefront that which they hold hidden within their bosoms. Again, I doubt not but there be those who will say that some of them are overlong. To whom I say again that whoso hath overwhat to do doth folly to read these stories, even though they were brief. And albeit a great while is past from the time when I began to write to this present hour weenas, I come to the end of my toils. It hath not therefore escaped my memory that I proffered this my travail to idle women and not to others, and unto whoso readeth to pass away the time, nothing can be overlong, so but it do that for which he useth it. Things brief are far better suited unto students, who study, not to pass away, but usefully to employ time, than to you ladies, who have on your hands all the time that you spend not in the pleasures of love. More by token that, as none of you goeth to Athens or Bologna or Paris to study, it behoveth to speak to you more at large than to those who have had their wits whetted by study. Again, I doubt not a jot, but there be yet some of you who will say that the things aforesaid are full of quips and cranks and quodlibets, and that it ill beseemeth a man of weight and gravity to have written thus. To these I am bound to render and do render thanks, for that, moved by a virtuous jealousy, they are so tender of my fame. But to their objection I reply on this wise. I confess to being a man of weight and to have been often weighed in my time, wherefore, speaking to those ladies who have not weighed me, I declare that I am not heavy. Nay, I am so light that I abide like a nutgall in water, and considering that the preachments made of friars, to rebuke men of their sins, are nowadays for the most part seen full of quips and cranks and jibes, I conceived that these latter would not sit amiss in my stories written to ease women of melancholy. Algates, and they should laugh overmuch on that account, the lamentations of Jeremiah, the passion of our Saviour, and the complaint of Mary Magdalene will lightly avail to cure them thereof. Again, who can doubt but there will to boot be found some to say that I have an ill tongue and a venomous, for that I have in sundry places written the truth anent the friars. To those who shall say thus it must be forgiven, since it is not credible that they are moved by other than just cause, for that the friars are a good sort of folk, who eschew unease for the love of God, and who grind with a full head of water and tell no tales, and but that they all savour somewhat of the buck-goat, their commerce would be far more agreeable. Nathless, I confess that the things of this world have no stability and are still on the change, and so may it have befallen of my tongue, the which, not to trust to mine own judgment, which I eschew as most I may in my affairs. A she neighbour of mine told me, not long since, was the best and sweetest in the world, and in good sooth, were this the case, there had been few of the foregoing stories to write. But for that those who say thus speak despitefully, I will have that which hath been said suffice them for a reply. Wherefore, leaving each of you henceforth to say and believe as seemeth good to her, it is time for me to make an end of words, humbly thanking him who hath, after so long a labour, brought us with his help to the desired end. And you, charming ladies, abide you in peace with his favour, remembering you of me, if perchance it profit any of you ought to have read these stories.